Today, we are diving into one of the body's most amazing survival tools, fatty acid oxidation. This is the powerhouse process our cells use to convert stored fat into a huge amount of energy, especially when our sugar supply is running low. Let's jump right in. So ever wonder how you can keep going? During a long workout or when you've been fasting overnight? Your glucose levels are dropping, but your body doesn't just stop. What's powering you? Well, that's the big question, and the answer is all about tapping into our body's ultimate fuel reserve, fat. So here's our game plan. We're going to follow a single fatty acid on its entire journey. We'll look at why fat is such a great backup fuel, how it gets fired up and shuttled into the mitochondria, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the beta-oxidation cycle. After that, we'll do the math on the massive energy payout, see what happens when things go wrong, and wrap it all up with the key takeaways you'll need to know. Okay. First things first, let's talk about the why. Why did we evolve to use fat as our main long-term energy stash? Turns out there are some pretty brilliant reasons.
Just look at the efficiency here. It's kinda mind-blowing. Fat gives you more than double the energy per gram compared to carbs. We're talking 9 calories versus 4. But here's the real kicker, how it's stored. Fat hates water, so it packs together without any. Glycogen, our carb storage, is a water lover. For every 1 gram of glycogen, you're lugging around an extra 2 grams of water. So when you do the math, gram for gram, fat gives you about 6 times more energy. Seriously, if we stored all our energy as carbs, we'd each be carrying an extra 50+ kilograms. No thank you.
And that brings us to the main event, beta-oxidation. This is the pathway we're really digging into. You can think of it like a disassembly line. It's the process of taking a long fatty acid chain and just chopping it up 2 carbons at a time. The beta part just tells you where it gets chopped, at the second carbon, the beta carbon, to produce these little 2-carbon units called acyl-CoA.
Now, before we can get any of that energy, the fatty acid needs to get ready. It can't just waltz into the cell's power plant, the mitochondria. No, it needs to be activated first, and then it needs a special escort to get past security. So step 1 is activation, and this all happens out in the cytosol. An enzyme basically slaps a coenzyme A molecule onto the fatty acid. Think of it like putting a tag on your luggage at the airport. It's now marked for its destination. But this process isn't free. It's an investment that costs the equivalent of 2 ATPs. This energy boost makes the whole reaction irreversible. There's no turning back now. All right, time for that escort service. The inner mitochondrial membrane is basically a VIP lounge. Not just anyone can get in. Our activated fatty acid, acyl-CoA, doesn't have the right credentials, so it uses the Carnitine shuttle. First, an enzyme called Cat1 swaps out the coenzyme A for a molecule called carnitine. Now it's called acyl-carnitine, and this molecule has an all-access pass. A carrier protein ferries it inside. Once it's in the mitochondrial matrix, another enzyme, Cat2, swaps the carnitine back out for a new coenzyme A. The now free carnitine gets kicked back out to be used again. It's an incredibly slick and perfectly controlled system. And this is just brilliant metabolic logic. The whole shuttle system is blocked by a molecule called malonyl-CoA. Why? Well, malonyl-CoA is the main building block your body uses when it's making fat. So it makes perfect sense, right? When your body is in fat-building mode, it puts the brakes on the system that moves fat in to be burned. This stops a pointless cycle of creating and destroying fat at the same time. Super efficient.
Okay, our fatty acid made it. It's activated, it's inside the mitochondrial matrix, and it's ready for the show. This is the beta-oxidation cycle, which is really more of a spiral, a set of 4 reactions that repeats over and over, slicing up that fatty acid chain.
So let's walk through the 4 steps. Step 1. A dehydrogenase comes in, creates a double bond, and boom, we generate 1 molecule of FADH2. Step 2. A hydratase adds a water molecule across that new bond. Step 3. Another dehydrogenase swoops in to oxidize it again, and this time we get 1 molecule of NADH. And finally, step 4, a thiolysis enzyme uses a fresh coenzyme A to chop off a 2-carbon piece, which is our acyl-CoA. What's left is a fatty acid that's now 2 carbons shorter, and it just goes right back to step 1. This cycle repeats until the whole thing is broken down into acyl-CoA units.
And for anyone prepping for an exam, here's a little gift. To remember the enzymes in order, just say this to yourself. Dehydrogenase, hydrase, dehydrogenase, thiolase. Say it a few times. Got it? You won't forget it.
Okay, we've done all the hard work of chopping up the fatty acid. Now for the fun part. Let's count our winnings. We're about to see the massive ATP treasure we get from just 1 molecule of fat. We'll use a common one, palmitic acid, which has 16 carbons. Let's break down the math. To break down a 16-carbon chain, you only need 7 cycles, because that last chop gives you 2 acetyl-CoA pieces at once. So, 7 cycles gets us 7 FADH2 and 7 NADH. Each FADH2 gives us about 1.5 ATP, and each NADH gives us 2.5. That gets us to 28 ATP from those alone. But we also get 8 molecules of acetyl-CoA. Each of those goes into the TCA cycle and gives us another 10 ATP, so that's 80 more. We add it all up, remember to subtract the 2 ATP we invested at the start, and we get our grand total.
A whopping 106 ATP. That is just an incredible amount of energy from one little fatty acid. To put that in perspective, a whole molecule of glucose only nets you about 32 ATP. This really shows you just how unbelievably dense fat is as a fuel. It's why we can survive for long periods without food and why marathon runners can go for hours.
So this pathway is obviously essential for life, which begs the question, what happens when it goes wrong? This is where all that biochemistry connects directly to medicine. Let's look at what happens when fatty acid oxidation breaks down.
So, first, what if that carnitine shuttle we talked about is broken? That's carnitine deficiency. The long-chain fatty acids are basically stuck outside the club. They can't get into the mitochondria to be used for fuel. This means the body can't burn fat for energy, which is especially dangerous during fasting. It can lead to severe muscle weakness and hypoglycemia, which is dangerously low blood sugar.
Next up is MCAD deficiency. Here, the defect is in the very first enzyme of the beta-oxidation spiral, but for medium-chain fats. So imagine an infant with this condition who sleeps through the night. Their glucose runs out, and their body tries to switch to burning fat. But it can't. The pathway's blocked. So you get severe low blood sugar. But here's the key diagnostic clue. You don't get ketone bodies. Ketones are an emergency fuel for the brain that are normally made from acetyl-CoA when you're burning a lot of fat. No ketones plus low sugar is a state called hypoketotic hypoglycemia. And tragically, this is one of the known metabolic causes of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS.
And here's a wild, real-world example of this pathway getting poisoned. It's called Jamaican vomiting sickness. It happens when someone eats unripe ackee fruit, which has a toxin called hypoglycin A. This toxin directly shuts down the acyl-CoA dehydrogenase enzymes, the very same family of enzymes that are faulty in MCAD deficiency. It completely blocks beta-oxidation, leading to a sudden, severe drop in blood sugar and all the terrible symptoms that go with it.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground here. We followed that fatty acid all the way from storage to a massive pile of ATP. So let's wrap it all up with a quick summary of the most important high-yield points you need to remember.
Okay, so if you remember nothing else, remember these 4 stages of the journey. First, activation, out in the cytosol. That's the 2 ATP investment. Second, transport, using that all-important carnitine shuttle to get into the mitochondria. Third, the beta-oxidation spiral with its 4 repeating enzyme steps. And fourth, the big payoff, energy production, when all those products get cashed in for that huge yield of 106 ATP.
And to finish off, here are a few questions to make sure this all sticks. Which enzyme in the shuttle is the key one that gets shut down by malonyl-CoA? What's that magic number, the net ATP from palmitic acid? And finally, can you explain the link between this pathway and SIDS? Really thinking through these will lock this crucial information in your brain. Understanding fatty acid oxidation is just non-negotiable for understanding how our bodies work in sickness and in health. Thanks so much for tuning in.